All right, welcome back here to the channel. John Kurtz, joined by my good friend TJ Pittenger from College Football Addiction, Double Fries, No Slaw, covers Florida State, covers college football. You should definitely go check out both of those channels, and I'm sure you can figure out why he is here today. We got some big news out of the ACC that ESPN has picked up the ACC option through 2036, so that TV deal won't end in 2027. It is extended on, which I know many are viewing as a really positive sign for ACC stability, at least in the near term future. TJ, I'll just ask you, like, what was your initial reaction to all this?
Not much, right? Like, kind of expected this. Now, some of the follow-ups that I'm sure we'll talk about that Ross and David Hale and different people have talked about, like, there was some reaction to that. But the actual extending of the agreement was what I thought was 85 to 90% most likely. Maybe there was a small 10 to 15% chance that they could use the leverage over the ACC to move some properties around. Maybe that's what the most optimistic FSU fans were hoping for, like that ESPN could go to the ACC and say, like, hey, we're not going to renew unless you let like Florida State and UNC come over to the SEC, and then we'll renew you guys and keep your lifeline afloat. Again, I thought there was maybe a 10% chance of that. There was maybe a 1 or 2% chance of them just not renewing altogether. But again, like, we're talking, I was very confident that they would renew this thing. We've had Doug, I know you've had Doug Rohan on. He was a little more confident that they would use it as some leverage, maybe not do it. But I was pretty sure and had tried to tell people, like, man, we're this close now. I think they're renewing it. I just think it would have leaked. It would have leaked out that, like, major internal strife, like they're not close to a deal. I kind of thought it would go down. Am I thrilled it went down? I mean, not necessarily. I would have loved one of those other two options, but I didn't have a huge reaction to the agreement being extended.
What's interesting, you brought up David Hale, and he had a really long, extensive tweet thread earlier today. Yeah. One of the things that I found most interesting was just right off the bat, he said, is this the end of the ACC's troubles? And he said, for now, mostly. So I'll ask you that same question. Do you feel like this is a real peacemaking kind of thing for a while? Is it going to get to the point where we have lawsuits dropped, some kind of compromise on grants of rights, and everything that would probably need to happen for that to be the case?
Well, I do think that David's right in the sense that whether the lawsuits continue on, whether we get if a settlement happens, then certainly a settlement won't happen without dropping of lawsuits, right? That will be part of the settlement, or that's what they will be settling on. But even if a settlement doesn't happen, this just gives the ACC a security blanket to where even if Florida State and Clemson, if they were to like pony up the money tomorrow to leave, like private equity, or they just Elon Musk donates the money to get them out of jail free, right? Because they added 3 other teams, it wouldn't drop beneath the composition clause. Like, one more team would have to leave, a UNC, a Miami, whatever. And so ESPN has now kind of given the ACC that security blanket to where even if the absolute worst happened with Florida State and Clemson, like a judge comes in tomorrow and grants them release. Now, that's not happening. But yes, so it does provide the ACC stability. And I do think it's the end of their troubles for now, whether a settlement happens or not, which I'm a little more inclined to believe based on the reporting from them, based on the reporting from Ross, that a settlement is closer now than it's ever been. But settlement or not, yes, I would agree with Hale that this is giving the ACC some stability, even if Florida State and Clemson left tomorrow, which I don't anticipate.
Well, such a huge part of like a settlement seems to be like, and we saw this reported back in September, and I do find it interesting the way that the wording has changed. So like back in September, it was reported like, hey, FSU and Clemson are really pushing for, if they're going to agree to something here, that it would be changing the grant of rights to end in 2031. Now it seems like it's more, the wording is like just reducing the cost in 2031 as opposed to outright changing when the grant of rights ends. Like, what do you think needs to happen there for that to be satisfactory? Because that is really important, as Ross Dellinger has pointed out. Like, couple of the TV contracts, Big 12 and Big 10, are going to end right around then. And that's when people really expect some kind of seismic shift, whether it's Super League breaking away from the NCAA, like something big happening at that point.
To me, this is just my opinion. So, Ross, David, people way smarter than me could have a different opinion. I actually think that's a protection for the ACC more so than Clemson or Florida State, because it's the same impact to Clemson and Florida State. If the grant of rights ends, or if there's just no penalty, they are leaving for the Big Ten, the SEC, something, right? Duke's not. Well, Duke's kind of an issue. Boston College is not, right?
Right.
Wake Forest is not. So keeping the grant of rights going and just letting that contract continue to play out, I think that would be where the ACC looks at a Boston College or a Syracuse and says like, oh, okay, you want to leave with Florida State and Clemson? Like, good luck on the open market, right? So to me, that's more of the impact is the same for Florida State and Clemson, Miami, UNC, Virginia. But that protects the ACC to just kind of keep that contract going. And so that's the way I interpret that. Maybe somebody in the comments or maybe some legal mind can interpret it differently, but I think that's more of a protection for the ACC because the impact to Clemson State and Florida State and schools like that maybe want to get out is the same. Whether the grant of rights ends or whether the penalties just end, it keeps the contract going for the schools that want to remain in the conference. If Florida State and Clemson leave, I anticipate the ACC will add schools. And if that's the case, I think it just keeps things going for the ACC.
You're obviously so much more plugged in on the Florida State side of this than I am. And there's been, I mean, you ask anybody their opinion on like, well, was, Big Ten or SEC actually interested here? What's the deal? I mean, I've always been of the opinion, like, of course, if they found a way to break free, the SEC and Big Ten are going to be interested, but they have to kind of cover themselves publicly here right now. Like, what do you think through this whole process so far, the actual interest level has been on the side of SEC Big Ten in acquiring Florida State and Clemson?
The same as our interest in Sydney Sweeney, right? Like she's there, but she's not really attainable, right? Like, so to me, that's the same thing, right? Yeah. Like I would love to go on a date with Sydney Sweeney, but I'm married with 3 kids and she probably has somebody that she's with too, right? Like, so there's just not a fit, right? If we were both on the open market, maybe that's a different story. But right now I'm not going to be tweeting my love every day for some supermodel, right? So to me, it's the same exact thing, right? The SEC, the Big Ten, no matter how you rank them, how you want them, if a Florida State, a Clemson, a UNC, a Miami were out there on the open market and they had interest in you, you're probably giving them a call. I don't think anybody wants to get caught in oh yeah, we definitely want them. The conferences also want to project strength. No one wants to project, oh, we need Florida State right now and give that. I mean, could you imagine Greg Sankey found out that some AD is out here saying, or some president is out here saying, like, we need Florida State tomorrow, like you want to project strength. And so I think that's what a lot of that is. I mean, McMurphy likes to go back to his tweet and dunk on that every time there's a new update with this. Of course, I think, of course, the SEC and the Big Ten will say, no, we're good where we're at. We're going to project strength. We are very happy with the members of our conference, because why would you look desperate right now when you can't get them anyway? So all that said, I think that if Florida State and Clemson were free and clear right now, or free and clear in 2031 to go somewhere else, they will absolutely take them. They weren't saying in 2022, oh my gosh, we need Texas and Oklahoma. Like we want them in our league. We need Oregon in our league. But as soon as they became somewhat available, it was take them immediately. So I think that that's more of where it's coming from.
Well, how are Florida State fans reacting to this? And like, what do they ultimately want in light of this news? Like, what realistically does the fan base think can and should happen? And when, I guess maybe more importantly, is when would it realistically happen?
Well, like we talked about a second ago, like no fans are reasonable or realistic. And so, yeah, they want to be out yesterday and play the 2025 season in a different conference or independent or just whatever. I think they're reacting, your most delusional or your most just craziest, expectations are frustrated with it because they thought there was a realistic chance that this wouldn't happen and we would just be out because we don't have a TV partner anymore in the ACC. And so you just go do what you want. I never really thought that was a possibility. And so I'm not really upset at the news. I do think there have been mixed emotions to the reporting of, an increased revenue share and a lowering of years. I think that is a win for Florida State and Clemson. And I think it's a win for the ACC too. Which again, just a straight, not breaking any news here. That's what a compromise is in effect, right? Like you give up a little bit, we give up a little bit, we get a little bit, we get a little bit, and we come to meet in the middle, right? So the ACC is protected for the next 5 or 6 years. They are not necessarily having to pay out Florida State more. It's kind of coming from extra money from ESPN or extra money from the lower tiered members in the conference. And Florida State gets a little bit more money, and Clemson potentially has an opportunity to earn a little bit more money during that time frame. Not be spending the money on the lawsuits. So I think your more measured fans are like, is this the scenario we wanted? No, absolutely not. But is it a small win? Is it a minor win? Is it a compromise meet in the middle settlement? Yes. So there's mixed reactions. Nobody wants to be in the ACC for 5 more years. Like nobody's happy about that. But if I gave you 5 years or 10 years, you're going to take the 5 over the 10.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. That's what I came away from this thing thinking like, because that's consistent in the reporting. The big ESPN story yesterday said again, moving toward that, they already have the incentives in there for performance, but then there's going to be brand based incentives as well, which was a big part of Florida State's entire argument in court. And when all this started in board meetings and all that, was like, hey, look at how much we're bringing in terms of just eyeballs to all of our games. So yeah, you are getting that, and you are potentially getting at least some kind of relief, maybe with the grant of rights here. I don't know if I were a Florida State fan, I'm certainly not, but I would be looking at that kind of like, hey, this is pretty good. We can pocket some extra cash here. I guess assuming that everybody else is on board with the brand stuff, but I think they're pretty much going to have to get on board with that.
Yeah, I think they will. Because again, what is their alternative? All the Florida State and Clemson continue to fight this thing, and if they find a loophole to get out, if an attorney a judge says like, you know what, you make a good point, like let's roll, especially with hometown cooking in Tallahassee and in Clemson, South Carolina. Yeah, I mean, do you want to take that risk? And then if you're again, I don't mean to dunk on Syracuse or Boston College, but if you're Syracuse or Boston College or Pitt, like, what are you doing then, right? Like hoping the Big 12 takes you. So yeah, and like you said, it's a compromise. Like it is. I mean, we heard from Twitter attorneys on both sides, and I'm not calling out Doug or anybody else specifically, but we heard from some people saying like, oh, this is the grant of rights is absolutely airtight. They'll never have a chance. And I mean, if that's the case, then why are they reducing the timeline by 5 or 6 years, right? I mean, if the grant of rights is really that airtight. And then on the other side, this is a slam dunk. This case is, which again, that's why I want to preface. I'm not talking about Doug because he never said this, but this is a slam dunk. Florida State's out tomorrow because of these lawsuits. I mean, neither one of those were right. The grant of rights wasn't as airtight as maybe we thought it was, and Florida State didn't have the golden ticket to get out. And so that's why both parties kind of met in the middle, because neither one of them could take the risk of being wrong.